When my husband demanded a divorce after 15 years, I didn't argue. I signed the papers with the same quiet grace he'd always expected of me. While he celebrated his newfound freedom with his mistress at our favorite restaurant, I approached their table, calm and composed. "Congratulations on your freedom," I smiled, sliding an envelope toward him. His smirk faltered as he opened it. DNA results, indisputable proof the twins he adored weren't his. His mistress paled, his mouth opened, but no sound came. That was the moment I took everything back, my dignity, my power, without raising my voice. But it hadn't started there. It started with blood-red lipstick on a white dress shirt. No screaming, no confrontation, just the quiet, suffocating horror of truth. I'd been gathering laundry when I found William's gym bag tucked behind his polished Oxfords, half-zipped. The shirt he'd worn to his emergency surgery the night before was crumpled inside. The stain wasn't blood. No surgeon walked into an OR wearing that shade of crimson. I remember the moment down to the second. Tuesday, 9:17 a.m. The twins were at school, Sophie at her piano lesson, and I stood frozen in our walk-in closet, heart pounding. For years we'd been the Williams, the perfect family everyone envied. William, the brilliant cardiothoracic surgeon with steady hands, and me, the devoted wife who held everything together. Oak Ridge Heights adored us. The manicured lawn, the picket fence, the glossy hospital galas where he'd toast me with champagne. "Kate makes this possible," he'd boast, and the other doctors' wives would smile, envy flickering in their eyes. But I'd miss the signs, the late nights, the distance. Golfing with colleagues became a convenient excuse. Conversations shrank to schedules and logistics. When he was named chief of surgery, I threw him a surprise party. He smiled, thanked me, but later accused me of embarrassing him. That night, he slept in the guest room. "It's just the pressure," I told my sister. "Men change under it, or they show you who they always were," she warned. I tried. Lingerie, date nights, desperate attempts to salvage what I thought we still had. He smiled politely, his eyes always somewhere else, usually on his phone. "Is everything okay?" I asked once, forcing the words past the lump in my throat. "Just tired, Jen. The Jenkins case is tough." Then came the locked office door, the late-night calls, the growing coldness. I trusted him. I believed trust was what made me better than those insecure, suspicious women. But as our 15th anniversary neared, I planned a trip to Napa, our honeymoon spot. His phone buzzed while he showered. Just a glance, I told myself. One peek to sync calendars. The screen lit up. Dr. Sarah. Last night was amazing. And just like that, the perfect life I'd built crumbled. Quietly, efficiently. But I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't beg. I'd simply play the long game. And when the moment came, I'd deliver my revenge with a smile. The words burned into my mind. "Can't wait to feel you inside me again." "When are you leaving her?" My fingers trembled as I scrolled, each swipe another knife to the gut. Hundreds of messages, stretching back 8 months. Photos, intimate, shameless. Plans were made while I drove Sophie to piano recitals or helped the twins glue volcanoes for science class. Their cruelty was casual, effortless. "William, she's planning some big anniversary surprise. Sarah, poor thing, still thinks there's something to celebrate." I placed the phone back on the counter, careful not to make a sound. I made his coffee, kissed him goodbye, watched him walk out the door with the same hands that had held our children, and then collapsed to my knees, retching until there was nothing left but the bitter taste of bile and betrayal. That night, after the kids were asleep, I waited for him in our bedroom, our room. where we'd once dreamed of the future, grieved our losses, built a family. Are you sleeping with Sarah? My voice was low and steady. He didn't flinch. He peeled off his watch and placed it carefully on the nightstand, like it was just another routine at the end of his day. Yes. How long? I forced the words out. Does it matter? He shrugged, cold, detached. I want a divorce, Kate. No guilt, no shame, just execution. Efficient, merciless. Why? My throat burned. I've outgrown this life, he said, gesturing around the room like it was a cell. I'm 45. If I'm going to start over, it has to be now. Start over? My voice cracked. We built this together. I save lives, Kate. He cut me off with a bitter laugh. What do? Bake cookies? Organize my sock drawer? Each word landed like a slap. I built this life despite you. I had put my teaching career on hold, raised our children, hosted dinners, and played the perfect wife, all so he could climb higher. Now he wanted to discard me like a worn-out coat. You'll be taken care of, he added, emotionless. The children will adjust. They always do. That night, he slept in the guest room. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if the last 15 years had been nothing but a well-crafted lie. By morning, he was gone. His lawyer's card left like an afterthought on the kitchen counter. That was the moment the illusion shattered. The perfect family, the perfect marriage. It had never been real, but I wasn't going to be his collateral damage. I called Helen, the most ruthless divorce attorney in Oak Ridge Heights. Document everything, she said, especially the money. That night, while the kids slept, I unlocked the home safe and pulled out 15 years of financial records. At first, it was routine, tax returns, investment portfolios, but then the discrepancies appeared, like rot beneath polished wood. Regular withdrawals, $5,000, $7,500, and $10,000, funneled to a shadowy LLC named Riverside Holdings. 2 years, nearly $250,000 gone. I confronted the bank. The manager hesitated, but finally confirmed what I'd already suspected. Riverside Holdings belonged to William. The money trail dead-ended there. Is this normal? I asked Patricia as I slid the statements across her desk. She adjusted her glasses, frowning. Hidden assets are common, but this feels calculated, long-term. And that's when she mentioned Alex, and everything I thought I knew about William's betrayal unraveled even further. The name hit harder than I expected. Nathan Brooks, Patricia said, her tone careful, came up in another case of mine, a former colleague of your husband. Left Ashford Medical Center 3 years ago, under interesting circumstances. Might be worth a conversation. I vaguely remembered Dr. Brooks, soft-spoken, almost painfully shy at hospital galas, always lingering near the exits like he couldn't wait to leave. One day, he just disappeared. Professional differences, William had told me, brushing off my curiosity. Nothing important. I believed him, like I always had. It took 5 calls to track Brooks down. He was buried in a small family practice 40 miles out, a world away from the pristine halls of Ashford. His receptionist stonewalled me until I said William's name. There was a pause, then she transferred me. Mrs. William. His voice was rough, heavy with something that made my stomach knot. I've been waiting for this call. For years. We met at a rundown coffee shop off the highway. Brooks had aged like someone carrying the weight of too many secrets. Deep lines creased his face, hair grayer than it should have been. He ordered his coffee black and stared at me, eyes sharp behind his glasses. I always wondered which of us would break first, me with my conscience, or William, drowning in his arrogance. His words unraveled what was left of my world. The fertility clinic at Ashford had a problem, he began, his voice barely more than a whisper. Couples came in. Everything should have worked. But it didn't. Reports didn't match the lab work. I started digging. I froze. My throat tightened as I remembered our own failed cycles. 3 rounds of IVF for the twins, 2 more for Sophie. Every heartbreak, every miracle. "What are you saying?" I managed. He didn't flinch. Dr. Reed, the clinic director, was falsifying records, switching specimens, and manipulating results to keep the success rates high and funding steady. When I confronted him, Brooks exhaled slowly, like it still cost him. He confessed. And William knew he was in on it. "No," I breathed, shaking my head. "He wanted those children. We both did." Brooks slid a worn thumb drive across the table, his hand trembling. Hospital files, lab reports, William's signature, authorizing procedural modifications. That's what he called it, tampering with specimens, including yours. I stared at the drive like it might explode. "Why?" My voice cracked. Brooks hesitated. "It started with ambition. Mercer was on the board that promoted him. But there's something else. William has hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. Genetic. Mild in him. But there's a 50-50 chance of passing it on. A surgeon with his ego couldn't risk children carrying a flaw that might damage his image. So, he made sure." His voice dropped lower. The donors were anonymous. But it was never William's DNA. Not once. The weight of it crushed me. I couldn't breathe. So my children. I gripped the edge of the table, trying to stay upright. "They're not his." Brooks nodded. "And he made sure you'd never know." I left the meeting with the thumb drive burning a hole in my purse and a referral for discreet genetic testing. That night, after the kids were asleep, I moved like a ghost through the house. Hairbrushes, toothbrushes, samples collected with surgical precision. One of William's combs from the master bath he no longer used. The 2-week wait nearly broke me. Meanwhile, William pushed harder, escalated the divorce, demanded custody evaluations, painted me as unstable, incapable. "She's emotionally fragile," his lawyer wrote, "financially dependent. The settlement offer was a slap in the face, barely enough to survive, a final insult from a man who'd stolen everything. But I smiled through it all. Science projects, Sophie's recital, PTA meetings. I played the role of perfect wife, perfect mother, waiting. Hospital schedule. I told the other moms, you know how it is. At night, I buried myself in research, fertility fraud, ethics violations, families torn apart by secrets buried decades deep. But none of it touched my story. Nowhere did I find a case where a husband had engineered his own children out of existence. Then, on a gray Tuesday, the call came. "Mrs. William, we have your results. Would you like them emailed, or shall we discuss them over the phone?" My throat was dry. "Email," I whispered, because whatever came next, I wanted to see it, black and white, no denials, no escape. I whispered the word email, knowing I needed to see the truth laid bare, cold and clinical. No amount of sterile medical phrasing could soften what was coming. When the report arrived, the words hit like a blade. The alleged father is excluded as the biological father of the tested children. Probability of paternity, 0%. Simple. Final. I sat still, staring at it until the letters blurred. Then I printed 3 copies, one for Patricia, one sealed inside the safety deposit box I'd opened in my name alone, and the last slipped into an Ashford Medical Center envelope I'd stolen from William's office while still pretending to be his dutiful wife. But my hands didn't tremble anymore. Grief had calcified into something colder. Purpose. This wasn't just infidelity or secret bank accounts. No, This was betrayal at its root. He'd stolen my choices, rewritten my motherhood, and built 15 years of my life on a lie so complete it shaped our children's very existence. And all the while he played the benevolent provider, the brilliant surgeon, the family man saving lives while quietly erasing the foundation of our own. But the DNA results changed everything. Now I held the weapon that would burn it all down. I started where it mattered most, with others like me. Dr. Brooks, somber but steady, gave me a list of 27 couples who'd undergone IVF at Ashford under William's oversight. I made the calls. Most shut me down instantly, unwilling to crack the fragile illusion of their perfect families. But 5 said yes. We met in coffee shops and backyards, voices hushed, stories painfully familiar. The Millers, twins with no family resemblance. The Petals, years of infertility suddenly solved. Their daughter now battling unexplained health issues. The Wilsons, tears spilling down Sarah's cheeks as she whispered, "We were just so grateful. We never asked how." It was through the Wilsons I found Paul, a former nurse from the Ashford Clinic, now tucked away in a cluttered apartment outside the city, surrounded by the ghosts of the past, filing cabinets, journals, boxes of papers she'd never let go. "I kept everything," she said, her voice shaking as she opened a worn leather ledger. "They thought I burned it, but I couldn't." Her hands trembled as she showed me page after page, patient names, altered protocols, forged signatures. I tried to report them, hospital boards, police, the ethics committee. But your husband? Powerful friends. Every time the investigation vanished, there it was, my name, my IVF cycles, the exact dates. Next to them, William's signature authorizing specimen replacement for quality concerns. No donor listed, no consent recorded. I photographed everything, every page, every signature, every nail for the coffin. As I rose to leave, Diane pressed a business card into my hand. "Agent Michael Dawson, Medical Ethics Investigation Unit. Tell him I sent you." Dawson met me in a windowless office, files stacked like barricades. He'd been circling Ashford for 18 months, blocked at every turn. "Your evidence changes that," he told me. "But we'll need more. Money trails, admissions, someone inside willing to talk." So I played the part. Perfectly. Smiling through mediation, nodding at William's thinly veiled insults, agreeing to custody evaluations and his pathetic settlement offers. "You're being surprisingly reasonable, Kate," William mused. After one tense meeting, his smirk was so smug it made my skin crawl. I smiled back, sweet, hollow. "The children come first," I whispered. "I just want what's best for everyone." And deep down, I knew what was best for everyone was making sure Eric's world collapsed exactly as he'd designed mine to. His arrogance swelled with every concession I feigned, each polite smile feeding his delusion that I'd already surrendered. William paraded Sarah through our children's school events, flashing her like a trophy in front of mutual friends who exchanged awkward glances, but said nothing. He brought her into our world with shameless ease, even letting her sleep over when the kids visited his sleek downtown apartment. Meanwhile, I stayed silent, recording conversations, photographing files, quietly assembling my arsenal. What I didn't expect was where my private investigator would lead me. I'd hired him to dig into Sarah's background, assuming I'd find the usual, an ambitious career climber or some tangled financial trail. Instead, the truth hit harder. Sarah wasn't just a colleague or lover. She was Madeline's daughter, the same Madeline who died on William's operating table 5 years earlier, during what was supposed to be a routine valve replacement. The official report claimed Madeline had concealed a critical medication. William had walked away clean. But Dawson's records told a darker story. William had spent the weekend in Chicago with Sarah, returning sleep-deprived and reckless. The surgical error was his. The cover-up is swift. Falsified charts, hush money from Ashford's discretionary fund, a grieving family left shattered. Her father died a year later, stress-induced heart failure. Alone, Sarah reinvented herself, severed ties to the past, and inserted herself into William's life. Her revenge had been meticulous, almost admirable. I considered approaching her, proposing an alliance, but revenge fueled by grief burns hot, unpredictable. Mine needed to be cold and calculated, so I stayed the course. Over the next month, I gathered sworn statements from former employees and tracked the money trail from Ashford to Riverside Holdings, straight into offshore accounts. I watched William, baiting him carefully. During one of our staged co-parenting chats, I steered him toward the past. "The twins have your eyes," I mused. He smirked, distracted. "Good genes." I let it linger, then struck. "Do you ever worry they inherited your heart condition?" His head snapped up. "What?" "Hypertrophic cardiomyopathy," I pressed. Dr. Brooks mentioned it. His face darkened instantly. Brooks should mind his own damn business. "But don't our children concern him? Concern me?" "There's nothing to worry about," he snapped. "I had them tested years ago. Without me, I'm their father, a doctor. I made a medical decision." I smiled as the recorder captured every damning word. His acknowledgement of the condition, the secret testing, and his false claim of paternity. It was all Agent Dawson needed, and the timing was exquisite. The Ashford Medical Center Gala loomed, their crowning event of the year. William was set to receive Physician of the Year for his unwavering ethical standards. The irony was almost poetic. The invitation arrived, still addressed to Mr. and Mrs. William. William texted smug that Sarah would be on his arm, but I was welcome to attend if it wouldn't be too awkward. I replied with perfect restraint. "I wouldn't miss it. You deserve this honor." What he didn't know was that I'd already met with the hospital board chairman. Dawson's full case, fraud, malpractice, conspiracy, was scheduled for a private session just before the gala. As I slipped into the black silk gown Sarah once mocked in a text, suburban chic desperation, I felt a calm I hadn't known in months. The final details slid into place when I learned William planned to celebrate at Vincenzo's after the ceremony, the very place he'd proposed 15 years ago. Poetic symmetry. The DNA results waited in their cream envelope. The authorities were poised. Every piece is set on the board. For the first time, I felt it. Certainty. William had spent 15 years building his lie. Tonight I'd burn it down. Tomorrow night the facade would finally crack, and the truth would pour out. The evening of the Ashford Gala arrived like fate had handpicked it. Thick clouds rolling overhead, the scent of rain heavy in the air but holding back, as if even the storm wanted to witness what was coming. I stepped into the grand ballroom alone, my black silk dress clinging to every line of me, a dress William once mocked, claiming it screamed desperation. My hair was pinned high, diamond earrings, his long-forgotten anniversary gift, catching the chandelier light as I passed through clusters of the medical elite, nodding politely, a perfect ghost in a crowd that had always ignored me. It didn't take long to find him, William, basking in his kingdom, arms slung around Sarah's waist like she was his prize. She wore blood red, the same cruel shade that stained his shirt all those months ago. Their laughter rang out, flanked by board members and hospital donors, sycophants orbiting Eric, the brilliant surgeon, the family man, They had no idea the clock was already ticking. Barely an hour earlier, I'd sat unseen behind a pane of frosted glass as Agent Dawson laid bare the truth. Financial trails, patient testimonies, Paul's journal with its damning ink. One by one, the board's faces fell, from disbelief to fury to grim resolve. The DA had been called. Officers were stationed at every exit, waiting. And William was too busy collecting his praise to notice the jaws tightening around him. I played my part well, mingling, nodding at hollow words of support from women who'd once dismissed me. "You're so brave, dear," Rita whispered, the chief of surgery's wife, eyes flicking toward William and Sarah. "Coming tonight of all nights." I smiled, sharp enough to draw blood. I wouldn't dream of missing William's moment. The ceremony went on. Nancy took the podium, choosing public humiliation over quiet consequence. William ascended the stage, applause echoing like a funeral march. He clutched the crystal trophy, face glowing with rehearsed humility. "Medicine is a sacred trust," he began, voice smooth as glass. "Our ethics define us. Every choice, every cut of the scalpel must honor that trust." I watched Sarah then, her posture perfect, her expression soft. But in her eyes, I saw it, the truth. She knew this was a farce, as much as I did. Our gazes locked, and for the briefest moment there was understanding between us. We were two sides of the same blade. Afterward, William and Sarah left for Vincenzo's, as I knew they would. I waited. 20 minutes later, I arrived with the cream envelope tucked safely in my clutch. The restaurant was just as we'd left it. White linens, soft candlelight, the haunting rise of Italian opera weaving through the air. The maitre d' greeted me like no time had passed. "Mrs. William, your husband said you might join them." Of course he had, setting the stage for one final performance. There they were, seated at our table by the window, the 1982 Bordeaux already breathing between them, the same vintage we'd toasted with on our anniversary. William's eyes caught mine first, his face shifting from surprise to a condescending smirk. He thought I was here to beg. Sarah turned slowly, a mask of concern in place. "Kate," William called out, voice laced with patronizing amusement. "What a surprise." "Is it?" I asked, calm as ever. "You told the maître d' I might come." "A courtesy," he shrugged. "I didn't think you'd actually show." Sarah moved as if to leave. "Maybe I should give you two a moment." I stopped her with a steady gaze. "No, stay," I said. "You've earned your seat at this table, Sarah." Sarah's face drained of color, her perfect composure crumbling as my words hit their mark. William's brow creased in confusion, his voice rising with growing panic. "What the hell are you talking about?" he demanded. I kept my gaze steady on Sarah. "She knows. Don't you, Sarah? Or should I call you Sarah, daughter of Madeline, the patient who died on William's operating table after a botched valve replacement, the same woman whose death you helped him bury?" I let the words hang there. "Funny, isn't it? You've been sharing a bed with the man who killed your mother." William turned, realization dawning slow and ugly. "Is this true?" he rasped. Sarah's silence was answer enough. While his world tilted, I slipped the cream envelope onto the table, the Ashford logo glaring in the candlelight. "Congratulations on your freedom," I murmured. "Consider this my parting gift." With trembling hands, William tore it open, skimming the DNA results. I watched as disbelief gave way to horror. "No, this is impossible," he choked. "Is it?" I whispered. "You made sure your sperm was never used. You rigged our IVF treatments, falsified records, stole from me the right to choose. 15 years of lies, William. Our children. You knew they were never biologically yours. Sarah's head snapped toward him. What is she saying? Nothing, William barked, scrambling for control. She's desperate, can't handle the divorce. I smiled coldly, nodding toward the entrance. Then you won't mind explaining that to the hospital board, and the district attorney, and maybe our children someday. William turned, his face contorting as he saw Dr. Winters standing stiffly with Agent Dawson and 2 officers. You vindictive. Choose your next words carefully, Dawson cut in, stepping forward. Dr. Eric, you're under arrest for medical fraud, financial crimes, and multiple ethical violations. The restaurant fell into stunned silence as handcuffs snapped closed around his wrists. Sarah sat frozen, staring at the glass of wine she'd barely touched. You planned this, William hissed at me as they dragged him out. 15 years, I said quietly. You lived your lie for 15 years. I only needed 3 months. Sarah didn't move, didn't speak until William was gone. I didn't know about the children, she whispered. I nodded. I believe you. Your mother deserved justice, Sarah. So did mine. The scandal exploded across every headline. William's medical license was revoked. Felony charges piled up, and the fertility clinic shut down. Families lined up, desperate for answers about their children's true origins. Every dollar he'd hidden was traced, every asset frozen. My children's futures were secured through a trust funded by the fortune he'd stolen. Dr. Brooks found me after the hearing, his eyes tired but proud. Ashford's creating an ethics committee. They asked me to lead it. But I want you beside me, Kate. No one understands better. For the first time, someone saw me, not as William's wife, but as my own person. 6 months later, I met Sarah for coffee, our unlikely alliance tempered by loss and survival. Do you regret it? She asked softly. Exposing it all. The kids. They'll know one day. I thought of my children, asleep in the home I'd fought to keep. They'll know the truth, I said, but they'll also know their mother chose it. I won't let them live in someone else's lie. That night, I felt it. Not revenge, not triumph, but freedom. For the first time, I wasn't a supporting role in Eric's perfect story. I was writing my own, flawed, raw, and finally real.